Noriu pakviesti šeštoje mūsų pranešėją, ypatingą viešinę iš Olandijos, KCAP urbanistikos dizainerę, Kotryną Kozlovskają, kuri mums papasakos, kaip planuoti miestą, o gal kaip neplanuoti jo.
Hello, hi, my name is Kotryna. It's nice seeing you all here. Yeah, as it was told, I came from the Netherlands because I work for this multinational company called KCAP Architects and Planners, and we are based in 3 locations. I am based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. We also have offices in Zurich, Switzerland, and the office in Shanghai, China. So as you can imagine, I get to work with different projects in different countries and different scales. And what I basically do, I create urban spaces for us to live in. And of course, when I was asked to talk about smart cities, yeah, that's a super exciting topic to talk about, especially now, when we live in such a fastly growing world. The population is growing, as mentioned before, and we are all surrounded by these technologies and smart gadgets and information, and it's so overwhelming. And one can't help out but wonder, so what's next? What's waiting for us in the nearest future? And how are we going to cope with that? And I think that the answer is to look closely into environments that we live in and to look closely into how we live in those environments. And maybe with a twist of mindset and thinking differently about the fundamental ideas of how we live, this could lead us towards more efficient, durable, sustainable world, to the world which is waste-free, where people live and they live openly and they live together and they share the same social responsibility about what's happening in the world. So yeah, my theme for today is how not to design a city, and you will later find out why I'm saying it like that. So as described, what smart city means for me is, of course you might say smart city is about all the high-end technologies, and it's about technologies that manage to gather data and manage to process it quickly, and that can help us to manage urban processes and fine-tune the daily life services. And yes, of course, you will be right, as we already heard so many presentations about technological part. But I think that smart cities, they are a combination of 2 elements, so the high intelligence and we call it low intelligence, so we call it urban intelligence. And what am I talking about here? I am talking about the social sphere and about public space design. I'm talking about spaces that that encourage people meeting, that encourage people interacting, that encourage inclusion, maximum connectivity and diversity. And why? Well, it's because at the high concentration of people in one place, with the correct mindset, what you can expect is the exchange and accumulation of ideas and goods. And therefore, here you have a smart city. And this is all embedded in the concept of an open city, a concept that the company I work in, strongly believes in for more than 25 years, and a concept that our founder, Professor Kees Christians, he very often presents it in his presentations. So you see these 2 diagrams, very low-tech diagrams, I can agree, but they were made in 1989, actually, and what they show is 2 models of a city models. So the one on the left, you see it's written city as a tree, and this model is composed out of monofunctional clusters. You see those bubbles, and those clusters, they are accessed by 1 or 2 access points, and they are separated by these infrastructural corridors and enclaved landscape. And what does this model do to the city and the people who live in that city? That it stimulates separation and dead-end situations, cul-de-sac, we call it like that. It also it's a model where the city is a car-driven city, where in order to fulfill your daily tasks, you have to go from one cluster to another, which is so inefficient and unsustainable. Now, another model on the right side is an open city model, and you see a fine mesh of, a fine network of streets. Those are the black lines. And then you have, you see those colorful lines, which represents neighborhoods, and they're all colorful, and they are also overlapping. What does the overlap mean? It means that people who live in this kind of city, in this kind of model, they are forced to meet, they are forced to interact, they are forced to talk, and at the end to create, to live diverse and open. So yeah, this is the model that we strongly believe in. And our task is not to give a clear-cut development plan, because you cannot plan an open city. You cannot just plan everything. Nothing works as planned ever. But what we can do as urban planners, we can use active intervention strategies to create conditions for natural positive behavior to appear in the organism called the city. So this is Professor Kees Christianse, and our role as urban planners is by using the knowledge we have, by knowledge of our practice and experience, to be able to pick the right ingredients of correct amount and correct amounts of them, to create correct linkages between them, and apply them to make an open city scheme work as optimal, smooth, and natural as possible. So our job as urban planners is to oversee and to curate the city so that it moves and grows into an open way. And when curating an open city, there are different strategies to do so. It always depends on the actual project, of a scale of a project, of, I don't know, the client, what kind of client you have, what kind of task you have. But I would like to mention a couple of these strategies. So the first strategy is what you can do is to create individual conditions. So sometimes you can create the living grounds with very special conditions that attract people to live in that spaces. And those spaces, very often, they carry a broader idea or a very broad image. And these are the elements that make the city work and carry an open city ideas. Then another conditions, another strategy we use, which is quite often, like very common used, is to create collective conditions. And those are urban guidelines, grids, a framework. Basically, it's like we create a set, a structure, that later helps the city to start to organize itself after we leave. And then lastly, but also very important aspect in curating an open city, is to work in an interdisciplinary way, because, as you know, cities are the organism created of many different elements, and it's super important so that they all work simultaneously in parallel and as a whole unit. And today there are two projects that I would like to show you. They are very different. So they're different in scale, in task, and how it was executed. The first one on the left is my colleague from Netherlands probably knows this. It's in Amsterdam. It's called HVL. It's the neighborhood project of 6 hectares, and it's very particular because it completely came out of public initiative, and this project has a very, very special and unique environment for an open civilization. And the second project on the right, called GLD, yeah, it's a Singaporean project. In Singapore, they always make abbreviations of out of everything. So GLD represents Jurong Lake District, and the commission came from the governmental body. And it was completely top-down approach project, which, you know, seems to be quite shady, but actually the whole project was executed in a very transparent way. with extremely high goals for technology, innovation, sustainability. And what is more, it was executed in incredibly huge team. It was interdisciplinary team. So as mentioned, I will start with the HDL. This project is one of the first KCAP projects. So in 1993, this water company had to leave the grounds. And here is the old situation. And what happened that because of local initiative, the zone was, this site was zoned as a residential area instead of industrial. And inhabitants, they strongly appealed for very unique environment. They wanted a district to be car-free, and they wanted to have an eco-district, meaning they wanted to discourage car ownership, they wanted to ensure optimal public transport, they wanted to have optimal conditions for and attention for cyclists and pedestrians. They wanted to live with certain people. They wanted to have a mixed people who would have same or similar ideas about how they want to live. And also they wanted to incorporate environmental goals. And together with those inhabitants and some consultancy companies, KCAP did a master plan. And we incorporated all the goals and created 600 dwelling units on this 6-hectare ground, and also preserved the local factory-like character. So the plan itself, it consists of the wavy blocks on the western and northern side. So the western side protects from strong west winds, and the northern block protects from the noise coming from the traffic up north. And then in the middle you see these freestanding blocks. They are 4 to 5 stories high, and they're standing on green islands that are islands of private gardens. And public involvement is seen strongly in the plan and in the architecture, and what people wanted to have. They wanted to have as many dwellings, to have a direct access to the house from the street level, and they all wanted to have as many as possible private gardens. So here is let's say one townhouse, and here they have a garden. But now what happens with these people who live a bit higher? What they got a piece of shared allotments in the public space. So this is very important because for the project was really important to prevent that public space becomes an enormous area that nobody wants to take care of. And this is the way to kind of take care of the public space. And as I said, there was a strong attention paid for environmental goals, especially for building materials, for water treatment, for vegetation, and of course for traffic. I know how it is in Lithuania, of course. I'm from Lithuania, and I know how it's important to have your parking place by your house. But this project works a little bit different because, as I said, they wanted a completely car-free environment. And in the middle, you will not see any streets, any parkings. You will see only public space, which is shared and used by pedestrians and cyclists. And the only parking available is on the western side of the block, and it's only for limited amount of parking places. And it has been already more than 20 years since the project completion. And actually, my colleagues visited the site a month ago, and they spoke with the residents. And yeah, they seem super happy to be living there. And actually, this neighborhood is one of the most popular and likable neighborhoods in Amsterdam. And you see how community has strong ties and how much activities they do together. They have feasts, they play football, they have markets. They eat their own trees, apples from their own trees, which is amazing considering that they are located in the very middle of Amsterdam, a metropolitan city. And they can just live their simple life in this green environment and just enjoy it. So it is a truly unique environment. So that's it for this project. Now I would like to show you another project which is so different in so many ways, and it is super exciting. I got to work on it as well. It's last year KCAP won a competition for a master plan of Jurong Lake District. They wanted to have a plan for a second CBD. CBD is Central Business District. Because you know that Singapore has this one strong CBD with all these famous buildings, Marina Bay Sands, and yeah, it's worldwide famous. So this project was organized by a governmental body. It's called the Urban Redevelopment Authority. Yeah, sounds really scary. It was a bit actually. And after we won the competition, they asked us to continue working on the master plan and to make it more detailed. And yeah, KCAP delivered a framework for a future city in the garden, which is located in highly dense and mixed surroundings, the context, and which is closely related to local climate conditions and sustainability. And before I jump into actual project, I would like to let you know a little bit about the context of Singapore. Singapore is truly an amazing country because within the past 80 to 60 years managed to completely transform from this small-scale boat makers village into a country of major developments and with a great aspiration to become a city in the garden, symbolizing a clean, efficient, high quality of life standard and strong economic stability. Oh, sorry. This is not. Sorry. Thank you very much. That? Yeah. I also forgot to mention a very important thing about Singapore, that from one-centric model, they want to become a polycentric model, so means create 3 or more models throughout the country. And why is it so? It's to evenly distribute living and working functions, and at the same time to reduce mobility costs and also create more mixed-use environments. And these centralities, it's kind of a rule that they're linked to major transportation gateways. And here on the west side, in 2025, there will be a new transnational high-speed railway terminal, and that is where we have to design this new CBD, which will become a business hub and a center for innovation on a broader knowledge corridor, because it's located in this corridor over here. It has a couple of huge universities. 3.5 million square meters of mixed-use development on 180 hectares. That's the task that we had to deliver. So you may ask, how did we work in such a complex task and such a big scale? We used 3 devices to help us to deliver an open city concept and with a high quality and on time. So the framework helped us, helped us to create a finely grained grid with urban blocks for maximum connectivity and walkability for people. And every block could be programmed differently. And also because of the very specific design solutions, we could intertwine those blocks between each other and on different levels. You will later understand why. Then the rotation of the plan was very important because it assisted us into working with natural conditions of the site. It stimulated the natural ventilation, because you can imagine that in Singapore it's super hot, and also it protected from too much of sun exposure. Then we worked a lot with urban guidelines, and here you see all the topics that kind of, the city consists of these topics, right? Like you have landscape, water, mobility, massing program, and others. So what we did, we created a bunch of guidelines that would help for people who come to work after us, like architects, to use those guidelines and to work within them to create the environment we as urban planners, we set. And then last but not least, we worked in a multidisciplinary process, and we used all the elements of the city as a whole and not as a sum. So talking about the project, for this, as you can imagine, to design a city in the garden, the landscape theme is super important. And what the design for landscape attempts is to create all the green networks together with creating new urban places or public spaces. We wanted all to connect this and to make it easy for nature to feel free also in urban environments. And also this amazing Singaporean rule, which is 100% of built footprint has to be compensated by water absorbable rooftop gardens. And as you can see, it really helps to create this image of city in the green. Then the topic of mobility was also super important. We had to incorporate many different modes of transportation, and at the same time we had to leave the streetscape for people to enjoy, and for landscape, and for water. And also this public space had to have a lot of quality, a lot of good conditions to spend the time there. It has to be vibrant and active public spaces. And the whole district is designed also as a car light, anticipating new forms of hybrid private-public transportation modes. And overall, 80% of all trips to and from Jurong Lake District is supposed to happen via public transport. And you can ask, so where is the parking? The parking is organized in parking hubs, and there's also very limited amount of cars available to park there as well. And in order to ensure the streetscape for people and landscape, what we had to do, we had to create this whole underground world filled with different infrastructure modes. So in the red box you see a high-speed railway, then there is the metro lines, there are bus interchange hubs, parking hubs. So this whole elements, they are created underground. And then on the ground you have the public spaces, also in different levels for people to enjoy. And talking about public spaces and streetscapes, here's one of the most interesting streetscapes we created. And as you can see, it's used by people and people who use personal mobility devices. And also the public space is on different levels. And what this do, it also helps the block to be integrated and to be intertwined. And also it makes public space to have more activity, more functions, and more vibrant appearance. And talking about urban block, for this project specifically, we created a new block topology, and it consists of 3 parts. In the lower part, you have the podia. Then on top, you have towers, and on the very top, you have flat roofs with sky bridges that connects these towers. The podias, they are super interesting because they're consisting of various functions, and they're carved of these. They are carved of these. They carved with public space and atriums and landscape, so it makes this whole labyrinth of public space in the podia level. Then on top you have towers, and they also are porous because it enables for the natural ventilation. And what is also really interesting about the towers is that they were limited to one height of 135 meters, which enabled to create this flat green rooftop, and together with the sky bridges, it would create this real 3D world. Very exciting place to live in. And the project had so many exciting elements, but I'm afraid I don't have much time, I can't tell you everything. But there's one more thing I would like to talk about, is the organization and managing the complexity. So you can imagine that in order to integrate all the elements of the city, you have to have a lot of knowledge, and you have to have a lot of support for different consultancy companies. And you also have to include all the stakeholders in the site, and you have to be super transparent. So we were a leading consultant, and we worked with 8 other consultancy companies, which were like also other architects, landscape planners, infrastructure engineers. And we, in parallel, had to integrate 13 other projects running in parallel. And we had to answer to our Holy Urban Redevelopment Authority, the steering committee, and of course for the public. So this all had to be carried out within 6 months, and with multiple workshops, VC conferences, endless emailing, and of course all this helped us to supervise and to overlook the whole process. This was not an easy task, but I think we succeeded quite well. And here is the moment from our work. On the left side you see one of the workshops in Singapore with all the consultancy companies. They're always super long and super busy, and everybody is super opinionated. And then on the right side you see this happy moment when Case is giving his presentation. I believe this is for the steering committee, and he's surrounded by all these models, all these big screens, and it's super exciting. So to conclude, when designing smart cities or future cities in general, both high and low technologies should be combined in order to achieve a resilient, holistic, flexible, and long-term urban framework. I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.